when you were little, I bought you off the street for $500. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please do subscribe, and if you're old here, hello again. My name is Kay Philpott and I cover true crime and missing person cases on my channel. Today, I'm bringing you a case that is literally what makes me so passionate about sharing missing person cases, and that's because Melissa Highsmith was missing for 51 years. Over half a century. And just recently, she has been found alive and well. But what were the circumstances around her disappearance? What happened? How did the family manage over that half a century? What is the in-between between, okay, she went missing and okay, she's found? Well, we're going to dive into this because it is a really interesting case. So let's start off with Melissa's parents, Jeff and Alta. They were only 17 and 18 when they were set up on a blind date by friends. Alta was very shy, more on the introverted side. And actually, she hadn't had it easy herself growing up. So her mother had given her and her 5 siblings to an orphanage when Alta was only 2 years old. So you can imagine that brings a lot of less than ideal circumstances and possibly trauma growing up without loving parents. And then we have Jeff. Well, Jeff was young. As any 17-year-old guy, he wasn't the most emotionally mature yet. Sorry, lads. But they got on great. They dated for some time and then they got married on the 22nd of November 1968. Now, within a year, they had their first baby. This baby was Melissa Highsmith, who we're talking about today. They loved her to bits, and even though they were young, like 18 and 19 years old, they were happy to be her parents. They loved the whole thing. Melissa was quite an active baby, you know, like she needed a lot of minding. But after a few months, they relocated to Illinois, and this was in 1970. Now, this is where things start to take a dip for Jeff and Alta as a couple. Jeff's recollection of this time was that Alta was not a very nice person. She was miserable all the time, struggled with her own childhood trauma, and was just constantly sad or angry or highly stressed about something, or all of the above, right? So, like, it wasn't easy. And obviously between this and the stress of being so young with your own baby, Jeff decided enough was enough. He had to get out of that relationship because it had turned so toxic. So he left her. But she was the one who ended up moving with Melissa, and they moved to Fort Worth, Texas, while Jeff stayed in Illinois. It is very interesting to me that when Alta relays this very story, she tells it very differently. Jeff was a musician, okay? And he was apparently out playing every night. She one night went to the club that he was playing at, and, you know, she was asking around, seeing if anyone knew where he was. And someone told her that he was with some girl. That may or may not be innocent, but she takes it with a grain of salt and continues to look for him. And lo and behold, she finds him with this other girl. And it wasn't innocent. So she just walked on out of there and left him. So you see what I mean? Like, both of them said they were actually the one to leave the other, and both of them positioned themselves as the innocent party, but there's that. It's not really relevant to the story, I just find that interesting. So Alta is down in Texas now, and she is honestly struggling. She's struggling financially, she's struggling with the overall stress of being a single mother of such a young child, and how is she possibly gonna even make ends meet? Jeff didn't send her any financial support whatsoever to help with raising Melissa. He also didn't call or check in on them at all, and he did have a new girlfriend. So now I don't know if this was the same girl that Alta saw him with at the bar that time, but anyway. So Alta decides to move in with an old friend, kind of more old acquaintance, because she'd bumped into this girl called Carol, who had also grown up in the same orphanage as her. Like, they weren't close as such, but obviously it's a lot cheaper to bunk up with someone else rather than have a place all on your own. So Alta, Melissa, Carol, and Carol's son, who was a similar age to Melissa, lived at the Spanish Gates Apartments in Fort Worth, Texas. This was also a pretty low-end kind of apartment complex as well. But still at this point, Alta finds herself between a rock and a hard place. It's either A, stay at home taking care of Melissa and not being able to pay the rent or pay for basic things like food, so that obviously risks a ton of much worse circumstances, or get a job herself and hire a babysitter. So that's exactly what she decided to do. So she starts her own job search. And it takes a bit of time for her to get a job, and during this time Alta and Carol would often go out drinking together in the local bars. There was a bunch of that going on. Apparently Carol was also into some drug stuff. So there was that too. But after some time, Alta was hired by a local restaurant. Now, it's at this point where hiring a babysitter becomes a much more urgent matter because, the longer it takes, the more time she's going to have to take off work. And obviously when you just get a new job, you don't just want to start taking a bunch of days off, immediately. So she puts an ad in the newspaper. It stated, babysitter wanted 8 to 3:30 p.m. days, Spanish Gates apartment, call after 3 p.m. And that was on the 18th of August, 1971. This was about 4 to 5 months after they had moved to Texas. And there was one response in particular that seemed promising. So Alta was set to interview this woman at her workplace before accepting her to babysit Melissa. And the thing was, the woman never showed up for the interview. But then the woman called Alta and said, hey, actually, I really want this job. I'll take care of Melissa for you. I've got other kids at home and I have a swing set and I have loads of space, big back garden. It'll be great, And with Alta not wanting to take another day off work to mind Melissa, she just blindly accepted. And the woman was due to come to the apartment on the 23rd of August to pick up Melissa. Alta would already be at work by the time she was to arrive, so she told Carol, hey, the babysitter's coming today, can you please hand Melissa over to her? She's going to watch her for the day. And that brings us to the moment that changed everything. The 23rd of August, 1971. Carol had gone out drinking the night before. It's not exactly clear as to whether or not Alta had joined her, but Carol was definitely out. And she was feeling, not great on this morning. She was probably pretty hungover, probably pretty exhausted, and Alta went out to work. This meant she was leaving Carol to look after Melissa while Carol was waiting for the babysitter to arrive. When the babysitter arrived, she said her name was Ruth Johnson. Ruth Johnson came into the house and was kind of maybe a bit nosy by the sounds of it. She was kind of looking around. She noticed that Carol also had a child and offered to babysit him too. With this, Carol said no thanks because she just felt a bit off about it. So sure, take the risk with someone else's baby when you already don't feel good about the situation. Part of me is is it just because she was hungover and not arsed to deal with a baby in the house that she was just yeah, go on, take it. But yes, still she handed Melissa over to Ruth. And Ruth said that she'd bring her back later. Obviously the reason I'm doing this is, do we really think that this person's gonna come and take someone's baby and actually use their real full name? I don't think so. Anyway, that right there was the last time Melissa Highsmith was ever seen. Now, immediately after this encounter, Carol lies down on the couch. Again, she's probably hungover and tired, and she feels a little uneasy about handing Melissa over to this honestly complete stranger that neither Alta or Carol had met in person before. And in that moment, she heard the car starting and she just something felt off. She felt super uncomfortable about it. So she jumped up to go get Melissa back. But the car drove off quicker than she could even get the woman's attention. If only she had that realization moments earlier, maybe this would have turned out differently. Now, later that day when Alta got home from work, she expected the babysitter to bring Melissa home around 5 to 6 p.m. 5 o'clock came and went, 6 o'clock came and went, and Alta realized she didn't even have a contact number for this woman. She didn't have her address, she had nothing. There's no way for her to contact this stranger who had taken her daughter for the day. So she just gets really worried. I mean, of course she does. This is huge. And about 2 to 3 hours after the agreed upon time for the babysitter to come back, when she still hadn't come back, Alta reports the incident to the police. And of course, as always, the police said there was nothing they could do about it. At least until Melissa was 24 hours missing. So frustrating, yes, but honestly, Alta didn't know what to do other than just cry all night. I don't blame her. But she did call back the following day, and police agreed finally to open an investigation. And they did get the FBI involved straight away, so that's something too. Now, they questioned Alta and they questioned Carol. Alta clearly had no information whatsoever, but Carol, hang on a second, Carol was the last person to see Melissa, as well as also being the only person to have seen Ruth Johnson. So she gave a description, and her description of Ruth was as follows. She was a lady with a dress on and a hat. She was wearing white gloves, and she was kind of masculine for a woman. I say the last bit because she later came out and said that maybe this was a man dressed in full drag, but that again was like much later. But that was it. That's all we got. So Ruth Johnson could have been a man in a dress and a wig, and also people thought it was very weird that Ruth Johnson was wearing gloves in Texas in August. Like, from what I've heard, it's pretty damn hot in Texas at that time of year. And not only would you not need gloves to keep your hands warm, but also it would be uncomfortably warm to wear gloves, you know? So could this have been maybe because Ruth Johnson had very masculine hands and that would have been a giveaway? Did she or he have any scars or tattoos that would help identify them? Or did they just not want to leave any forensic trace behind? It could be any of these, or it could be something completely different that you just don't know. So post-disappearance, right, Alta rings Jeff to let him know that Melissa was abducted. And he just plain does not believe her. I can kind of understand that. At the same time, he also had his new girlfriend in his ear saying, don't listen to her, she's just trying to get you to go back to her and all this stuff. But Alta reminded him that this was actually real. She was trying to get that through to him, clear as day. Melissa was actually abducted, but Jeff just full on didn't believe her. Well, he didn't believe it until the FBI came knocking at his door, I believe the next day. And they actually came knocking at his door to see if maybe he had Melissa. Because, sure, like that is something he could have set up. He could have sent someone to go get her and whatever. So obviously he let them in with no hesitation. He had nothing to hide. And when they told him about Melissa's abduction, he was genuinely in shock. They realized that early on, like he had nothing to hide. Anyway, that was that. And obviously Jeff and Alta were heartbroken about Melissa's abduction. Fast forward another little bit, Jeff actually did break up with that girlfriend, and he ended up going and getting back with Alta. So there's that. This was years and years later, but like maybe there was like a little trauma bond going on there. I don't know. Anyway, they got back together, they got married again, and they went on to have 4 more children. And these children, Sharon, Rebecca, Jeff, and Vicky, yes, there was another Jeff, so let's call him Jeff Jr., they went on to become paramount to this case and really keeping it out in the public eye, which is incredible. Again, though, it wasn't the happiest marriage. Alta still struggled with stress and her emotions. They weren't completely loved up or anything like that. Jeff slept on the couch most of the time. Like, it wasn't a happy marriage. And this marriage ended after 29 years because honestly, neither of them were happy. Like, the family dynamic was not the most peaceful. Alta was described as emotionally abusive towards the kids. There was even one occasion where she shoved Vicky against a radiator when she was like 6 or 7 years old and cracked her head open. It wasn't great. And the thing was, Alta had never gotten over Melissa's kidnapping. It was far too painful for her to talk about, even with her new children. That could have had an impact on how she was behaving. Interestingly enough, they actually have a really good relationship now, particularly Alta and Vicky. They live together, I believe, and they've cleared things up. It was just growing up in that house, it wasn't it wasn't great. So moving to more recent times, honestly, it is fascinating to me to hear how the family were feeling about this case only a few months ago, not knowing what we know now about Melissa being found. So only a few months ago, Alta was saying if he hadn't left for some floozy at a bar, maybe it wouldn't have happened. She blamed Jeff for a long, long time, and she also blamed herself. She said, if only I wasn't so trusting. She also said that she gave the search for Melissa to God a long time ago, and it's so hard to imagine that you could actually find your daughter after such a long time. And then also recently, when her son Jeff asked her if she believed Melissa was still alive, Alta said, I don't know, I hope so. And the thing is, whether this is motherly instinct or sheer coincidence, Alta has always felt that Melissa was alive and out there somewhere. And she always prayed that whoever took her took good care of her and that nothing bad happened. So obviously it is fascinating to hear those words that weren't even that long ago, knowing now that they've been reunited. I'm actually getting ahead of myself. I'll get to that in a little bit. So there was a lead that came up more recently that was very, very promising, right? Jeff Jr. had done a podcast, and a woman who had heard this podcast named Sandra called in a tip. She said that she believed her cousin was Melissa. Now, Sandra's aunt was married to a guy called Oscar. Oscar, a few things about Oscar, right? He lived in the Spanish Gate apartments. He worked in a local bar that Carol and Alta had frequented quite a bit. Maybe he knew them personally, I don't know. Oscar also possibly saw the ad in the laundry room where Alta said she was looking for a babysitter. And also, Oscar was a man who was known to dress in drag. And that might just line up with everything a person could need to fit this Ruth Johnson description. It gets weirder. Oscar had 2 daughters. One who he openly admits was an illegal abduction. The other, whose name is Becky. And there is no record of Becky's birth. And Becky also had the same birthmark Melissa Highsmith had. This is a lot. And I'm not even done here. Becky's own perspective was that she also seems to not think that Oscar was her real father. And she has a lot of questions about her early life. She also believes that there is a strong resemblance between herself and the Highsmith siblings and Melissa's age-progressed photos. She apparently looks very similar to Alta as well. So they were all convinced that Becky is actually Melissa Highsmith. Now, again, it gets weirder. Sandra, being the one who called in the tip, she said that during a time where she was staying with Oscar and his wife, there would often be a lot of babies and toddlers that would stay with them for like 24 to 48 hours. And that was it. And this would happen every single weekend. And it doesn't seem like they were the same babies every time either. So it seems like there's something very, very, very weird going on here. Oscar's explanation of this was that he was just babysitting. And maybe he was. I don't know. But the family were always just so confused as to how Oscar always had so much money. Because apparently he was not book smart. And he also didn't have the highest paying job ever or anything, right? So it was a bit like, eh. Side note, Oscar also apparently looked very similar to the composite sketch of Ruth Johnson. Like if he was dressed up as a woman, he would look like that. But the thing was, according to Becky, Oscar was very kind. He's a good father. He's a really wonderful family man. So can you really... Well, you can't argue that it's not a great thing. Oh, anyway. So it's at this point, right, where it seems like, oh, okay, we know Melissa has been found. We've heard this story about Oscar that sounds very promising. So what bridges the gap between those two? Well, that depends on why this even happened in the first place. Was it actually a woman who took Melissa? Maybe a woman that was struggling with her own fertility, or did someone take her in order to hurt her? Did someone want to profit financially from this? It does happen. But fast forward to September 2022. This is obviously very recent. And a tip came in from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, where someone thought they'd seen Melissa in Charleston, South Carolina. This woman resembled the age progression photo of Melissa at age 51. When they investigated this, it actually was a dead end, but it did reignite the flame under the family to keep searching, and thank God it did, because finally this case is solved. It is solved through 23andMe, an ancestry site. And this is not the first time we've had a case solved by 23andMe on this channel. So, quick side note, after this video, you definitely want to see this video I covered where the fertility doctor somehow ends up having almost 100 children without those children or their families knowing about it for years. It's madness. It's up in the cards, whichever side it is. But anyway, now 23andMe linked Melissa Highsmith's children to her actual family. Amazing. They came up as the grandchildren of Jeff and Alta. And that was the link. Jeff, Melissa's real father, reached out to Melissa on Facebook Messenger and told her what they'd found. Melissa, bless her, was like, look, I'm praying for you, but I don't believe that I'm your daughter. I don't know what made her feel the need to still take a DNA test, but she did. And it was a match. She was Melissa Highsmith. And Melissa Highsmith is now 53 years old with 3 children of her own. And she's lived so much of her life without even knowing that her real family were looking for her all this time. So they met in person for the, I guess you could call it the first time, on Thanksgiving just gone. It's amazing. And if you're anything like me, which I know you probably are, this one answer leads to a million other questions. Was Melissa Becky that we spoke about from Oscar Story? Well, actually no, because her name was Melanie before this. What about who took her? Well, the woman that raised Melissa, we don't know a whole lot about her at the moment, other than the fact that she currently lives in Missouri. But she told Melissa, when you were little, I bought you off the street for $500. And the Highsmith family, including Melissa, feel that this woman is the woman who actually took Melissa, Ruth Johnson, because she does kind of fit the description physically. And also, this woman knew that she was actually baby Melissa. She wasn't just some random baby to her. She knew she was Melissa Highsmith this whole time. So what about, where was Melissa this whole time? This is mad. Believe it or not, she was living in Fort Worth the whole time. Only 17 minutes away. What a weird experience for Melissa, by the way. Only seeing her baby pictures for the very first time, and everything she's ever known about herself and her family is a lie. But then at the same time, she's gained so much more than she ever thought she could, because she now has this whole big family who have so much love for her and so much catching up to do with her. And yes, it is overwhelming, but it's also fucking beautiful. And she is so, so, so happy. And that is the important thing here, because it is an unusual one. You're obviously going to have some kind of attachment to whoever raised you. Honestly, just look at the Kamaya Mobley case. She was taken by a woman and raised as she was that woman's daughter until Kamaya was 18. And she still calls her kidnapper mom. It's a tough one. But in this case, this seems to be a happy ending for everybody, except maybe the woman who raised Melissa, but that's a whole other thing. And the thing is, more details will come out about this case, because Fort Worth police are now carrying out a full investigation to find out what actually happened and how this all panned out over the 51 years. So I'll definitely keep you updated as more details come out. Unfortunately, the statute of limitations for kidnapping expired 20 years after Melissa's 18th birthday. So that's a bit of a pain in the ass. Because even though so much time has passed and maybe people have grown and people have changed and they're not criminals stealing people's babies anymore, that just means there's even more time that was stolen from Melissa and from her parents, her family, when they should have been together. And that's years and years of strife and anxiety and just pure emotional roller coasters for both Jeff and Alta. And even their younger kids who had never met Melissa. Melissa was their older sister and they knew about her. And she was never there. So the second oldest child was the oldest child. And they didn't know, should they be grieving? They never met her. It's confusing. Should they be grieving or should they be fighting to find her, or what should they be doing? It's a really, I can't even imagine all the different emotions that you go through, because there's so many different aspects of how it affects you. I'm just overwhelmed with happiness that they've reunited, because Jesus, like, honestly, this is it. Like, the next time someone comes and comments on one of my videos saying it's been this many months or that many years, they're probably dead, I will respectfully point them towards this video right here. This is literally why I feel so fucking passionate about sharing missing person cases. There is no proof that missing people are dead. They're just missing. They might be dead, but that's also not a reason to give up looking for them, because their families need to know. But they also might be out there alive and not knowing that they're a missing person. Or maybe knowing damn well that they're a missing person because they're in a really bad situation. And if we give up looking for them, that doesn't mean that their days in that terrible situation get any easier. So let this be the case that shows you to keep hope alive, because there is no reason to give up until you actually have the answers, the whole story. It's tragic that things like this even happen and that the Highsmiths lost out on those 51 years together as a family. But on the flip side, this case makes me really happy. It brings so much hope to everybody who's ever lost someone through a disappearance. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it just as fascinating as I did, leave a like to let me know, turn on notifications for my future videos so that you don't miss out on them, and comment below what your thoughts are. And as I said earlier, the next video you should watch is this one here. It is the weirdest case I've ever covered, but that's what makes it so fascinating and also uncomfortable. So enjoy that, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye guys.